You know, sometimes in life, you've got to be able to do things on your own, even if they're hard, specifically with things that you love. And there are going to be times in your life where you're going to have to set your boundaries, and you're going to have to ask yourself whether you want to be nice or whether you want to be kind. If you want to be nice and everybody like you through your whole entire life, I will tell you, you will get used and abused. If you are always trying to go around appeasing individuals and making other individuals happy, they will use you as a tool. However, there's a price that has to be paid for being kind. An individual who's kind is assertive, and they believe in themselves, and they set boundaries, and they don't ever let anybody cross those boundaries. And this is something that I'm having to do right now with a career that I had forged for almost 34 years with the United States Army. I had to cut ties with them. And it's over a 7 year experience, almost 8 year experience that I'm dealing with. And I'm going to talk to you about that in this video. This video, what I'm getting ready to do, I just want to have a conversation. I just want it to be a relaxed situation so I can let myself be free and be able to talk however I want to dealing with this situation, because it's nothing to be scripted. And I know there are other individuals out there in the world who've either gone through something that I'm going through something that I'm going through, and sitting up here going, why me? And I want to let you know that you're not the only person, because along this journey, I've learned that there are a lot of individuals out there in the public sector and in the private sector, that are just literally dealing with moral injury and dealing with a sense of betrayal. When I was younger, my father gave me some rules, some wisdom, and one of them is to never own anything that I did not do. And what that means is when somebody hands you a poop sandwich and they're like, hey, this is yours, and you have to deal with it, and you've got to bite the bullet, and you have to compromise your integrity for the organization, a lot of individuals will bend the knee and be like, this is for the better good of the organization. Everybody's got a price. And if you can be bought, you can be sold. I straight up, I just read that quote today, and it had a significant impact on me. I've always heard everybody has a price, but the way this individual framed it, if you can be bought, you can be sold. And that's very important, because as soon as you choose to compromise your integrity for another individual, you're done. Absolutely. The second word of wisdom that my father gave me was never pick a fight that you know that you cannot win. And I learned this a long, long time ago. Just don't go around picking on people, leave people alone, because you might bite off more than you can chew. And to always think about what I'm going to do before I do it, and have the potential consequences 4 or 5 years down the road. We're talking about long term effects of my current behaviors that I'm getting ready to do right now. So that means I've got to sit up here and think about what I'm going to do, and to also check my attitude. Now, when I talk about checking my attitude, I'm looking at it from the framework of the ABC model of attitude. That means I'm analyzing my affect, which has two components of my emotions and my mood. Okay. And then I'm also checking my thinking, my cognition. That's the C aspect. And then my behavior. I'm constantly always running a self test on myself and self reflecting to see how I'm affecting my environment, how my environment is affecting me. It's a continuous circle. And I came up with two rules that I've lived my life by, and I will continue to live my life by until my dying day. And that is, leave people alone and never play with your money. Because if you're playing with your money and acting a fool out there, you're not leaving people alone. You may be on a desert island acting a fool, but you still ain't playing with your money, and you ain't got nobody to mess with, because you're all by yourself. I introduced you to a term of moral injury, and I want to say that moral injury is the aspect, how I perceive it, is having another individual bloody their knuckles on my chin by repeatedly punching me in the face in the face. And they intentionally do this. The intention is to hurt me. And they intentionally know that they are breaking organizational standards by exhibiting counterproductive behaviors that are going against what the organization stands for. And they're also breaking the relationship boundary that we have entrusted with each other. And so when I say, when you want to be nice, you're going to allow somebody to constantly punch you in the chin. But when you're a kind person and you're assertive and you don't like being hurt by other individuals, you're going to tell an individual, hey, really don't appreciate that, and you need to stop, rather than escalating the situation and getting all wild and acting like an eighth grader. And then that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. And what I want to convey is, those individuals who hurt me, and you know exactly who you are, no one gets to punch me in the face without getting psychologically punched in the mind. And that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to talk about this situation that I've been going through, my family's been going through, my friends have been going through. And I will tell you, I know what changes a man. I really do. And that is the repeated bites of hyenas. Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Jermaine Irby, and I'm going to share a train wreck of a situation that I've been dealing with, and that is the Irby versus Wormuth case. You can look it up online. You can Google it. It's case number 2350747, awarding the Army summary judgment, meaning that they said my case didn't have any basis for pretext or either retaliation against my supervisor. I'm going to share my thoughts on how the government, the Army, exerted improper influence on the federal courts. And we're just going to call a spade here. I'm just speaking facts. I'm speaking on their behaviors based upon documents that I have. I've got the receipts and the selective presentation of evidence and potential violations of Army regulations. They say they're potential violations, and you're going to see how they're clear-cut deviations from what the Army says that they stand for, and what Secretary Hegstaff has been talking about, establishing good order and discipline. And we're talking about at the one of the highest levels. We're talking about all the way up to the Department of Defense, an old unit that was called FORSCOM. They're now called the Western Hemisphere Command, and a 3-star command over the past 7 years. That's 4 different 3-star commanding generals at Fort Hood, Texas. The center of this train wreck is my thoughts on regulatory breaches of the 3rd Armored Corps Command, their SJA, and the Department of Defense, or excuse me, the Department of Justice, with the handling of a commander's decision to unsubstantiate an investigation that was brought against me, and those findings and the misuse of that individual's sworn declaration stating that they unsubstantiated the investigation. So their argument is the Army is actually arguing that it was okay for me to lose my job and for particular violations of an Army regulation. And one of them is AR 15-63-7, which talks about the appointing and approving authority, the commander who launched the investigation. They're saying that the commander is not the sole gatekeeper of AR 15-6 and investigative reports release. And also, they're saying it's okay that the SJA, the 3-Corps SJA, release these findings without the approval authority, the commander's consent, which is just flat out stupid. I also want to talk to you about the continuation of observed behaviors that I've seen in my particular case. I just want to specifically focus on my case of moral disengagement, which is a psychological process defined by Dr. Albert Bandura, which states that where individuals convince themselves that ethical standards don't apply to them, allowing them to engage in harmful behavior without experiencing any guilt. I have seen this firsthand, and I have sat in various meetings and other things to where I've I've heard senior staff officers and commanders discuss how they are literally manipulating the rules to protect what they perceive as the integrity of the organization. And I will tell you, if the 3rd Armored Corps Command had the moral courage and was had the ability to ethically and logically rationalize their behaviors and their thoughts rather than acting like a bunch of hyenas, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be having this conversation, and I would have not had to go through my experience over the last 7 years. And what I want to talk about, this just isn't about me. At the end of the video, I'm going to give you a holistic picture of the impact of my case, which actually has impacted the whole entire Department of Defense and various changes in the Uniform Code of Military Justice due to one incident. So, when we talk about the hyenas, there's an old African proverb, and that African proverb goes as such. When hyenas want to eat their children, they first accuse them of smelling like goats. This signifies that when people, leaders, or institutions are determined to act in an unethical or destructive manner, they will create excuses to justify their actions. It is a metaphor for hypocrisy, scapegoating, gaslighting, and the rationalization of evil. It is a powerful metaphor for how organizational predators manufacture justifications just before destroying their employees. Ethical employees who refuse to compromise their integrity become targets. I will read that again. Ethical employees who refuse to compromise their integrity become targets and are reframed as threats precisely because of their moral courage. Having the moral courage to go against the status quo and actually follow and implement the rules of the game. They're being kind, they're being assertive. But here's a key insight: corrupt systems reveal themselves through their accusations. When leadership starts creating a narrative about troublemakers, and trust me, I have been called difficult and a troublemaker more than I can actually ever imagine in my life. They are not describing the employee, they are announcing their own intentions to devour, showing how manufactured beliefs enable predetermined consequences, with the hidden decision point being a moment when evil chooses its disguise. And they'll treat you nice and they'll include you in all the parties and everything like that. And then overnight, just like that, they're done with you. Remember, I told you, if you're able to compromise your integrity, that means that you can be bought and then you can be sold. If you're willing to do somebody else's dirt, falsify a report, fudge some numbers, hide a little misgiving, a misdeed, you can be bought and you can be sold. You are expendable, just a number, just a cog in the wheel. This proverb reveals workplace mobbing's DNA. And I'm going to talk about workplace mobbing a little bit later, but it really relates to the story of the hyena. Individual accusations, smells like goats, becomes the collective permission to devour. Everybody come get you a little bite of this. Come on, get you a little piece. You know you don't like herb. Let's go ahead and handle our business. The leadership silence, and oh, trust me, how many people were silent along this 7 year journey? It isn't passive. It's the dinner bell that rings that says, come and eat. And now I will share how I fought back against the Army by explaining the rules of the game, because you got to know how the rules of the game work. See, I used to teach this and I used to say, hey, when you've got your personal values, and that's perfectly fine, and then you've got organization values, and this fits inside an organizational context. And I used to tell people that, or my students and people, whoever I would coach, teach, mentor, and guide, and I would say, when your personal values collide with organizational values, organizational generally wins. It generally wins. When you're going through something, when you've been accused of sexual harassment, or you've been accused of some type of wrongdoing, it's going to be a dark place for you, and you're going to be isolated. But please understand that, and I can only speak for myself, that when I was placed under investigation and suspended for these alleged allegations of sexual harassment, that I was given the gift of isolation. And at that same time, I had started my second master's program in industrial organizational psychology. And during that time, I utilized my time efficiently and effectively. And I focused on my first class. And my very first class blew my mind. And it was learning how to critically think in psychology using the scientific method. So, how I got through, I would say, the first year of my ordeal was, I literally learned how to critically think my way through the debacle that was consuming my life. And I would sit back and I would observe, and I'd ask questions, and then I'd do research, because that's what I was forced to do. Literally, I was in a classroom environment, and then I'd be thrown out into the lab to be able to conduct a case study, not only on those individuals who were doing me dirty, but also myself, and seeing how I was thinking about it, what my emotions were, what my mood was. And trust me, it was one heck of a roller coaster ride. And then I would go back and I'd hypothesize what is going on around me. I would develop these wild hypotheses based upon the literature and the research that I was doing. And then I would go back and I'd conduct experiments. And I would see how I would react and how other individuals would react based upon the questions that I would ask. And then I'd go back and I'd analyze it, and I would share it with other people. And I was seeing a specialist, and I would share it with them. And then they would come back and they would provide me feedback, and I'd bounce it off the literature, and then I'd start over. And I did this literally for 7 years. It helped me to complete my master's degree, my second master's with a 4.0, and publish my thesis. And then it also helped me complete my PhD and to publish my dissertation, complete my dissertation on the effects of ethical leadership, procedural fairness, interpersonal relationships inside of the organization, and how you gain stakeholder buy in inside of the organization. How do you get your employees or your soldiers or whoever to buy into the organization's commitment? And I was quite shocked on how everything that I've experienced is counter to what the literature says and what pursuing a virtuous life is. And I just deduced it down to where I'm just sitting here looking at a bunch of stupid people. They're intellectually smart, but they're highly stupid. And they just continue to repeat the same they continue to have the same errors in judgment every single day. And I will tell you this: if you are willing to judge another, then you must be receptive of being judged for the judgment that you make on that individual. Because trust me, what you give is going to come back to you. Just don't sit there and think that you're just going to have permission to keep on punching somebody in the chin, because eventually they're going to get tired of getting punched in the chin, and they're going to start using their brain, and they're going to come back at you from a mindset perspective. Because if you know better, then you'll do better. And things won't get better until you stop being stupid and making them worse. So now, the last time that I made a YouTube video on my legal letter of reprimand and my court case, the organization came back and gave me a letter of warning. And this was in 2024, October 2024. And you can see it right up there on the screen. My higher level supervisor gave me this letter of warning. We sat down in his office and he was like, hey, man, we are getting calls from three-letter agencies. And these three-letter agencies are concerned about what you are saying. And I simply looked at him and I said, you're concerned. I said, apparently, these three-letter agencies are concerned that I'm telling the truth. I have a problem with that. And it's not necessarily truth. I'm speaking facts on observed behaviors. I'm smart enough to be able to apply the concept of what we call self-referent thinking. Self-referent thought is the mediator between knowledge and action. Before I exhibit a behavior, remember how I told you my father told me to think about what I was going to do before I was doing it? Albert Bandura came up with a concept, and when you apply self-referent thought, you are literally thinking on the knowledge that you possess. I'm not talking about beliefs. I'm talking about things that have support data that is valid and reliable to back up the knowledge. I'm just not pulling stuff out of my hair. So his higher level supervisors, and you can imagine at a 3-star headquarters who his higher level supervisors were, they said give him a letter of reprimand for speaking facts, on what actually happened. And we're going to get to actually what happened. And I just want to let you know, collective stupidity and workplace mobbing is everywhere. They will jump on you, man, and they will gang up on you just to beat you down, just to keep you quiet. And so I want to be able to put a disclaimer out here. I've done a little bit of research and I understand that the levels that my situation's at the district court level, federal court level, and the Fifth Circuit of Appeals, I am not trying to influence the courts in any manner. Let me say that again. I am not trying to persuade the courts in any matter. However, I am going to bring attention to how far workplace mobbing and unethical behaviors by highly intelligent people can literally destroy livelihoods and cause individuals to take their lives. When you have an individual who knows the rules of the game, can discern the difference between right and wrong, they are a moral agent, and they question the subjective norms of the organization, and then they are continually beat down and they're hazed and they're harassed. And they're like, this is not right. Remember how I told you that individuals will end up taking their lives? It happens every day because of this. And I'm just calling a spade a spade. And I want, for those who are dealing with a situation like this is what I want you to understand. You have to stand firm with what you're doing. And that's why I started my consulting firm, is to help individuals through tumultuous times like this. I once heard a story about a farmer who did absolutely everything correct in preparing the ground, planting his seed, sowing in the summer and the spring with discipline and consistency. And the night before it was time to gather the harvest, a hailstorm came through and pounded his crops into the ground. So the meaning behind this story, how I interpret it is that you can do absolutely everything correct by following the organization's policies, procedures, and truly buying into their organizational values and cultures and still get punched in the mouth. That's what I'm talking about. So right now, what you see on the screen, this is what the Western District Court said. And what I want to let you know, they sided in favor of the Army, stating they awarded them summary judgment because I couldn't, show pretext of Gores, who was the old Sharp program manager, my supervisor, action of retaliation. And it sets the conditions dating back to June of 2010 or June of 2015, where there was an argument inside the office dealing with how procedures weren't being appropriately followed. I'm just not going to go down that lane. And I'm just want to say I had a 14-year career in the Army EO program, the Department of Defense Sexual Assault Response Prevention Program, and the Army SHARP program, dating all the way back to 2005 when I was a soldier. And the argument got a little heated, so I was like, I've had enough. Something that I've learned along the way is to de-escalate, and sometimes you have to remove yourself from a situation because I want to protect myself and I also want to protect that other individual. We do not need to make things worse. Get up and leave. Be the bigger person. So I did. And I went out to my truck and I went out the back of the building. I backed my truck in. This individual followed me out. My truck doors closed. Now, just to let you know, I got a F-250 4x4, and she walks up, opens my door, and grabs me by my left elbow. Now, at that point in time, I've got to be able to respond to what's going on. But I also have to be able to protect my purpose, and my purpose is my wife. Remember, I told you, leave people alone. Don't ever play with your money, right? So inside my head, I've achieved contact. Boom. I've been hit. Somebody has violated my personal space. My very first thing was to protect myself because one, I did not know who grabbed me. Then I turned and I looked and I was like, got it. Don't ever effing touch me. Yanked my arm away and shut my door. She followed me. So what did I do? I contacted my supervisor, Mr. Goris, and he was a lieutenant colonel back then, and he did absolutely nothing. And I just want to let you know, in the Fifth Circuit of Appeal, they omitted that part that he did nothing, and they also admitted the part to where he had called me sheepish in September, which caused me to file a EEO complaint against him, and you can see that also on the screen. That when he called me sheepish, I was sitting in the office. We'd just come back from a brief, and he sit there and he looked at me and he said, "Why you looking all sheepish?" My response to him was, "Ain't no sheep here." How I perceived that was me sitting there being weak. I'm going to try to clean my language up, and I'm not going to use foul language because I know my grandchildren or either their teachers or somebody might will see this. They will see this. And so I'm not going to let it all flow. But I will let you know if another man calls me sheepish, nah, dog, ain't no sheep here. Nope, nope, not 120. Remember how I told you to leave people alone? I learned that a long time ago. I've seen a lot of people get their behinds handed to them for going around and thinking that they can punk other people and acting a fool. Also, the Waco court said in an incident in 2018, which caused me to get suspended, have my credentials or my certifications revoked, and I received a 3-year letter of reprimand from Mr. Gores. I will just let you know the last time that I worked with Mr. Gores was in June, July of 2016. He became my Sharp program manager as a civilian. He got rehired as the civilian Sharp program manager in August of 2018. And I was suspended on July 9th of 2018. And we did not work in the same office, in the same footprint until January 3rd of 2019. But he gave me the letter of reprimand on February 14th, Valentine's Day of 2019. So there had been a 2-year gap, 2-year gap. My hands are cold on how long we had worked with each other. So what did he had seen? And I'm going to get into that. This individual who was the senior installation SARC who filed the complaint against me, her name's Cupid, and she claimed sexual harassment and hostile working environment. They also claimed that the Army had petitioned for my reinstatement, but all of a sudden, in February, they did a 180-degree reversal. So when we sit here and we look at what the Waco federal court said, I appealed it. And I'm just like, dude, are you kidding me? And I'm going to get into the claims. And this is what the Fifth Circuit of Appeal says, they said that I failed to address that Gorez had ignored any policies or procedures and to act against the commander's decision of not issuing a letter of reprimand. It specifically states in AR 15-6 that the appointing authority, which Irby contends was Lieutenant Colonel Hubbard, who was the HHBN commander, and the appointing and approving authority for the 15-6 against me, was the only official who could act on administrative investigation, which is factual, according to the regulation. Reading this provision carefully, we cannot see how Gorez violated it. That's very, very interesting, because AR 15-6 says only the appointing the approval authority can act on an investigation. Assuming Hubbard was the appointing authority, he signed the appointing orders for the investigating officer. Hubbard acknowledges that Hickey, who was a captain at the time, I think he's out of the Army, was the investigating officer and recommended administrative action. We cannot see how Hubbard's inaction in response to the investigative findings caused Gorez to violate policy and by acting on Hickey's recommendation. Please understand this. An investigating officer's findings are only for the approval authority, no one else. And there's a reason why Colonel Hubbard unsubstantiated the investigation against me. So let's get into some of the questioning of Mr. Gorez. These are Mr. Gorez's words, not mine. And when asked who was the appointing authority for the 15-6, he had said the battalion commander. And would that be Hubbard or whoever it was at the time? And he replied back, whoever it was at the time. Kind of evasive from my perception. Also, who should the appointing authority and approval authority as it regards to the complaint against Mr. Irby? In this instance, it would be the battalion commander. So he's triangulated it to identify that it was Hubbard. And so when reading 3-17, it states that safeguarding a written report, and here it says, no one will disclose, release, or cause to be published any part of the report except as required and normal courses of forwarding and staffing, or as otherwise by law or regulation without approval of the appointing authority or other appropriate FOIA release authority. And he was asked, did he read it correctly? And it was like, yes. Did Colonel Hubbard ever provide approval for you to have the 15-6? The approval, and the answer was the approval authority, the 15-6 was provided to me via the staff judge advocate. Remember, I talked about the staff judge advocate releasing this 15-6 without the commander's approval, his legal advisor. But why was it provided? For review for CPAC and LMER, HR functions, right? So, well, what authorizes you to receive that from him? And he said, by my position as a SHARP program manager. Like, it gives you any type of special permission. Okay. We're just inside the SHARP office, we're just special staff. That's all we are. We facilitate a program. We don't own anything inside of the organization. We cannot take ownership other than what we do. The commander has the overall responsibility or the organization. The hierarchy structure of 3 Corps headquarters is this, as far as commanders. The 3-star and a lieutenant colonel who is the battalion commander, and they are responsible for all the staff members, the administrative processes, and so on and so forth, and all the equipment and everything else, deploying a unit, just simplify it, for the 3rd Armored Corps staff. So, but it says you need approval from the appointing authority or something, or you also need to be authorized by law or regulation. So what was it? I'm not sure. It was I was provided the document so labor management employee could review it. I was provided the document by Lieutenant Colonel Hubbard's legal advisor. So now I know who the commander is. Did you ask for it from the legal advisor? I do not recall. I want you to pay attention to what's on the screen right here, because right now, here you have an email from December 4th, 2018 from the attorney working for Colonel Hubbard, stating that they recommended a counseling to me for maintaining, an applicable working environment and anger management. Got it. Because I was a little pissed off at that time, um, because I was being falsely accused of something. Now I'm going to show you that. And then you can also see on the right hand side that there are two email traffics. I don't. This is just the outgoing to Mr. Hubbard, or to Mr. Gorez. One on the 17th and one on the 20th, where Mr. Gorez is actively soliciting to get the 15-6 from the SJA. So I want to shift to the significance of the letter of reprimand, because he eventually got that and sent it over to LMER, over to the HR, and they developed a letter of reprimand. And inside that letter of reprimand, Mr. Gorez said he personally witnessed me arguing with two employees. Now, remind you, the last time that I worked with Mr. Gorez was in June of 2015. It says you personally witnessed him. And he was like, when did that happen? I would have to refer back to my sworn statement. Now, we got a memory problem going on here. Sitting here, you cannot personally remember personally witnessing him arguing with two employees about a question, or when they questioned and answered inside the office. So I'd have to recall when I was Lieutenant Colonel 2015, 2016. So real interesting is how that was 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, remember what happened when that soldier, that SARC, came out to my truck, opened my door, grabbed me by the arm. Remember that Mr. Gorez personally came at me by calling me sheepish, saying I looked like I was weak. And I'm interpreting that because I didn't handle my business or get violent with an individual acting like a child when she opened my door and grabbed me by my arm, which I probably had every right to do. But we all know if you do something like that, specifically me as a male, that's not going to turn out well for me. So I chose the otherwise, which was to disengage and get away from the situation and report it to Mr. Gorez, which he did nothing. So we sit here and look at it. Those are the only that, and that right there led to the negotiated settlement agreement for me going to EEO saying, hey, he's showing favoritism to all the females in the office, which he was. And he admits to witnessing the behavior from 2015, 2016. So he said he goes against the negotiated settlement agreement, noting something from 2015, 2016 that he personally witnessed. Now, if I'm calling you out on some stupid stuff by using the organization's systems, if it were me and if I were a insecure man, I'm not calling Mr. Gorez insecure, but if I were an insecure man, I would probably hold a grudge. And I would probably want to get back at this individual any way that I could. That would be me. And apparently, like I said, I'm not calling him an insecure man, because these individuals have tendencies to file lawsuits against individuals. So I'm not trying to provoke the bear. I'm just trying to, what I'm doing is I'm just exposing the behaviors and the cover up of the violation of the organization's policy, and how 3, 4 commanding generals and their staffs can advocate for the violating of command policy, which is absolutely mind blowing. So here's what the appointing approval authority said, the commander. He was asked a question and it said, what was the investigation? The investigation was an EO an EO complaint by Sergeant First Class Cupid alleging that I created a hostile working environment and that I sexually harassed females in the office. I want to let you know I was never, ever, 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 ever told of the hostile working environment. I found out about the hostile working environment in June of 2019 before going into a EEO fact finding conference from a FOIA release that I received in the mail. And my wife was sitting on the couch and she was like, "Hey, did you know that you were under a EO complaint for a hostile working environment?" I said, "No, it wasn't. It was only sexual harassment." She was like, "No, you might want to look at this." So they hid that from me. You questioned me about hostile working environment, which I didn't know because after questioning me and the union representative, we walked out of there and they looked at me and said, "This is a witch hunt. We have no idea what's going on." Then you're going to give me a letter of reprimand for something that I did not know. And to let you know, I appealed the letter of reprimand with my higher level supervisor, not knowing that I was under investigation. So I had no idea what I was being punished for. Imagine that. But we're going to get to it. So, what kind of complaint was this? The appointing authority comes back and says it was sexual harassment and an equal opportunity complaint. Now, I've worked in the equal opportunity realm for 6 years straight as a sergeant first class at various levels, from a 3-star, 2-star, and 2 brigade levels. Ended my career there and then went and worked with the Sharp program and worked with that from 2010 all the way up until 2014 or 2018 when I retired. So I've got some real, not when I retired, but when I got moved, when I got retired out of that program, we could say. So I have a lot of experience in it. I got 14 years of training in this, so I'm very well fluent with what the regulation says. And if it was an EO complaint, I should have been notified of it. Did you initiate the 15-6 against Mr. Irby? And he said yes. Once that trigger's pulled, you have to go with it based upon the regulation from 2014. I know things have changed now. And so, did you discuss this with Mr. Gorez? He said yes. In the time frame that he talked with, this is once the investigation's over. He had given the findings to Cupid, and he had told Mr. Gorez that the 15-6 was unsubstantiated. This is where I'm getting at. That letter of reprimand is null and void. No good. But the Army, 3 Corps, and the DOJ have convinced 2 federal courts that it was substantiated. This is a sworn declaration by Colonel Hubbard under oath. And he said no action would be taken. And I'll explain why. I sent the email through JAG that the investigation was complete, and he met with Mr. Gorez and told him face to face, and he just said, "Got it." So he acknowledged that it was unsubstantiated. Did you ever read the findings to Mr. Irby? No, I designated it to Mr. Gorez per JAG counsel. That's absolutely wrong, and I'm going to show you how that's wrong too. Did you release the findings of the 15-6? No. Did you know Mr. Gorez was given the findings? No, this is not correct. That commander's sitting there, and I'm sitting across from him, and he's got the organizational lawyer with him, an attorney sitting right next to him while he's being interviewed. And that dude got pissed. He went 0 to 100, but he kept it composed. And I was like, I know that look when a commander knows that his staff has gone behind his back. And trust me, as a staff action officer, as an equal opportunity advisor, I have seen that happen. And that's when people get fired, because you never ever betray the commander. Ever. You are completely loyal to the Army and to the command based upon the rules and regulations. The union president, who was sitting to my right, she asked clarifying questions, and she said, "When you said it was not substantiated, were you talking about workplace violence and sexual harassment?" He said both. There was no teeth to this thing. And I'm going to show you why there was no teeth to this thing. You had no knowledge that the 15-6 or the statements were used against him. No, if I knew this, I would have addressed it. No one ever asked the commander, why did you unsubstantiate it? The 15-6. Now, the IO, Captain Hickey, said he substantiated the findings. But on the DA Form 7279, he said it was unsubstantiated. It's real weird. I don't know how he did that because there was only one investigation against me. And this is the problem that you run into a sexual harassment and EO complaint, specifically from two different programs when you put them under one investigation. And the investigation was actually appealed. The findings were appealed by Cupid because, for whatever reasons, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. But AR 15-6 notes that the approval authority may approve, disapprove, modify, and or add findings and recommendations consistent with the evidence included in the proceedings. The evidence supports the claim of counterproductive behaviors exhibited towards an individual. Here on the screen right now, you can see the investigating officer's orders. This was redacted, provided to me by a FOIA. They messed up and left his name in there, so I'm just going to leave it in there because this is through a FOIA. And you can see the scope of the investigation. All the areas cover workplace, a counterproductive workplace, except for one. One is sexual harassment, but I'm placed under a sexual harassment investigation. I didn't find out about this until June of 2019, almost a year later. So there's a difference between counseling. I just want to be able to define a counseling and a formal complaint. Throughout this time, the commander and I had multiple conversations because I'm trying to coach him, saying, dude, you're getting a lot of bad intel. Your staff is not doing their job and you're screwing this up. And they always say, when your enemy is making tactical errors, never ever interrupt them. But I'm trying to help the commander out because I'm still loyal to the command. I'm still loyal to the Army to this day. I still love the Army. The Army has done very beautiful things for me and my family. And this is what pisses me off, is because I am so loyal to the Army, and those who know who serve with me, they know this. They know I am the Army. Literally, I'd give my life for this country. There's a difference between counseling and a letter of reprimand. Counseling is a corrective action for identified behaviors that could progress into bad things. Supervisors and leaders pulled people off to the side and said, let's address the behavior that you're exhibiting. Let's talk about your thoughts going into that behavior and how you were feeling. All right? That is supposed to get the individual back on course. If those counselings fail, that's when you go to a letter of reprimand. So I know the difference, okay? So let's go back and let's look at how the commander was told by the SJA not to read me the findings. Based on Army Regulation 620, Army Command Policy, dated 14 November 2014. Specifically within the military equal opportunity and sexual harassment complaint procedures in Appendix C8, both the complainant and the subjects of a formal complaint have the right to appeal the findings of the investigation. That is the important part. You just don't read it. That's the commander's responsibility. If the subject of a formal sexual harassment complaint under AR 600-6, dated 2014, was not informed of the outcome or offered the right to appeal, this represents a significant procedural error in the military equal opportunity / SHARP process for filing complaints. Per regulation, the commander has specific legal obligations once an investigation is complete. Mandatory notification requirements, and this was backed up by a Force Comp supplement to AR 600-20. According to Appendix Charlie 7, once the commander makes a decision on the findings, the commander must notify the subject in writing on the DA Form 7279 whether the allegations were substantiated or unsubstantiated. If it was substantiated, I would have the right to appeal. But it was unsubstantiated. When I was read the findings, they said it was unsubstantiated. Cool. Can I go back to work? No. Why? Uh, and then there was silence. And I was like, y'all figure that out. I came back 3 days later and I talked to him again. The commander wasn't there. I'm talking to the XO. The XO provided me the findings of the report. And they were like, well, she elected to appeal it. So we're going to keep the no contact order in place. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's part of the process. I'm not mad at the process. Let the process figure things out. Trust the process, right? So, since I was never read the findings of the investigation, due process violation. Okay, I want you to pay attention to that. That is a due process violation. Failing to notify the subject of the results, and my right to appeal is a violation of Army Command policy. And kind of, sort of, technically, I'm still under investigation because it is mandatory that a commander read the findings to the subject and provide them the outcome in writing. That has never been happened. So why did the commander unsubstantiate the investigation? Let's look at that. On May 21st, 2018, Cupid said that I came into the office with a real nasty tone, asking her, why was I there? On May 23rd, she said she addressed it with the program manager. On May 24th, she said that I walked into the office with a very nasty tone. Got escalated, right? And I said, go home. What are you trying to do? On May 25th, she talked to the program manager, and the program manager said she would address it. Now, on June 27th, 2018, she was having a conflict with another individual, another SARC who was going to replace her because she was going to be retiring, whether 1st Cavalry Division could, their division headquarters sharp office, could conduct staff assisted visits or either inspections on their subordinate brigades. She tried to draw me into the conversation. I said, hey, I don't want to be any part of this because they've been arguing all day long. And based on what I know of Cupid, highly volatile from my perspective. That's no go terrain. Stay away from that. Don't talk to that. That's red flag indicators. Do not get drawn into that. And that's exactly what I did. She kept persisting. I'm like, dude, okay. Now I'm inside my office and she's standing at the doorway. And so I'm like, all right, let me ask a question. What regulation says that the command can or cannot? And she lost her mind. She just literally started to berate me. So at that time, I pulled out my common access card out of my computer, did the right thing. I secured my common access card, grabbed my notebook, walked across the street to go see my supervisor. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Sound familiar to the exact same behaviors that I exhibited in 2015. I de-escalate. I try to walk away, but I'm pursued. On that same very day, she contacted ForceCon, said she was gonna file a sexual harassment complaint. She filed that sexual harassment complaint on July 2nd. So here you can see the dates and everything that she wrote down. You can go ahead and pause it and read it. But here's the funny part. Look at these pictures. On May 21st of 2018, I wasn't in the country. I've been telling the command for the last 7 years I wasn't in the country. Literally, being able to talk about this is therapeutic. This is like totally awesome. It's like my own therapy. And they always say, whenever you're a good thing that you should do is advocate for yourself, which I'm doing. I'm taking this opportunity. On May 21st, 2018, at 1720, when me and my queen, my purpose, took this picture, we were on the Ford 10th deck of the Disney Fantasy at the Ford elevators, and we were getting ready to go get a cocktail before we headed down to Chow at 1745. Now let's look at the picture on to the right. If you ever get an opportunity to take a Disney cruise, they're awesome. We go all the time. Any rate, before I digress, the Virgin Island National Park. We're floating out there, and back behind us is Honeymoon Island. Totally beautiful place. Sand is totally soft. I don't think I was in the office at that time. Here's another picture. On the 24th, remember she specifically said with a very nasty tone. No, I'm on the 3rd deck of the Disney Fantasy Forward in the Walt Disney Theater, and we're getting ready to watch a show. Sorry, I wasn't there. I think the show was Aladdin. It's really, really good. It's an awesome, awesome story. It's like Broadway stuff. It's totally awesome. And then here, just to put the icing on the cake that I wasn't in the country, um, here we're on Castaway Cay, Disney's private island. You can see the ship in the background. Absolutely beautiful. It's our favorite ship. I wasn't there. That's a flagrant lie. That is straight up disinformation to persuade the command. And you know what that is? Hold on, wait a minute. I'm going to tell you what this is. What you see on the screen right now, this is a 15.6 that was launched 83 days after I contacted my supervisor about Cupid's behaviors. On, on 13 September, after me pestering the Battalion XO, what are the dates? What are the dates? Because if we're sticking to the rules of engagement, that means that she's got 60 calendar days from the alleged incident to file an EO complaint against me. 60 calendar days. So July 2nd all the way up to May 4th, that puts that in the window. So I'm cool with that. But here it notes that argument that they were having. Here it notes that I asked her 3 times to stop and I left the situation. I didn't do that. And that's based upon eyewitnesses and sworn statements. So once again, I contact my supervisor. Nothing happens. We got a problem inside 3 Corps headquarters, particularly dealing with Sharp, with your leadership in Sharp and how it's been counterproductive. Now let's go to the XO. So let's talk about the Battalion XO. So when we sit there and look at the Battalion XO, he was never under assumption of command orders. And he signed off on the DA 7279. And he signed off, and you can see that on the screen right there, and he signed off on the investigating findings. That unauthorized signature literally makes it procedurally invalid. Do you not think I talked to the commander about this? Do you not think that might have been part of the process of the commander saying, make this go away? It's unsubstantiated. It's already unsubstantiated for the 2 false claims that she made to launch the investigation. Only the commander with the authority to act on an investigation can sign off on the findings of a formal complaint. The commander disregarded the IO's findings upon discovering the false claims of Cupid, based on AR 600-20, Army standards. Here's the fallout. She was never, ever prosecuted or either questioned. They allowed her to retire. And she should have been punished upon the Uniform Code of Military Justice for violating Article 107, false official statement. She made 3 different false official statements. One on the 7279, which she swore to the accuracy of the complaint. 2, when she was interviewed by the IO, she had to swear to that complaint, and then she had to swear to the accuracy of her appeal. Wow, imagine that. I'm swearing to the accuracy that I ain't do nothing, that she lied, that I was here in the country. Imagine that. So now the clock technically ain't started, and I'm still waiting on somebody to read me the findings in the year of our Lord 2026. Still waiting, 3 Corps. If you want to come read them to me, you can come read them to me. So there was a lawyer. I sat down with the 3 Corps chief of staff, one of his lawyers, and the deputy chief of staff, a civilian, and I explained all this, and I showed him the pictures and all this other stuff, and a lawyer sit across me and tell me, the XO didn't have to be under assumption of command orders. This is for you, okay? In chapter 2, I need for you to go inside chapter 2, and it talks about in the absence or disability of a commander. Chapter 2-9 covers temporary assumption of command when a commander is absent. And in 2-5, the assumption of command orders, okay? It covers specific memorandums on how that is supposed to be announced. AR 600-20 requires that the assumption of command orders be announced via orders citing the regulation. That means anything and everything that IO was supposed, or the XO was talking about, had to have those assumption of command orders. Other than that, you're just speaking, you're just hot air. It just means nothing. So I did an IG complaint all the way up at DOD, and then it trickled all the way down. And so Forcecom got a hold of it. Now they took their time, they investigated like 2 months, like they were supposed to. They came back and said my due process rights weren't violated. And they said any new information would be best suited for the local HR, CPAC, and the union president. Why would I want to present any new information for an unsubstantiated investigation? Sound like a cover up? Smells like it. Now, let's look at Congressman Pfluger. I did a congressional. The three Corps chief of staff, who's not here anymore, he PCS, representing the current Corps commander, states that the investigation remains substantiated. Now, he's 3 commands removed. I have a sworn declaration by the actual commander stating that the investigation was unsubstantiated, and he said it various times in his sworn declaration. And then on top of that, I've never been read the findings. So my question is, if it was substantiated, the only person that could have substantiated was General Funk, General White, General Bernabe, or the current Corps commander. And do you think that they are going to put their careers on the line for that? Absolutely not. No general officer would ever do that. So if I was one of those commanders or former commanders and I just named their names, I would be pissed. I'd be pissed at my staff. And everybody who knows, you know I'm right. You know I'm absolutely right. I don't know how many times I have gone against the status quo to protect a commander so that they can protect the command. And that's not what's happening right now. You didn't literally lie to Congress. Here you see on the screen. You can see it right there on the screen. Pause it, look at it, read it, whatever you want. So we talk about workplace mobbing. Workplace mobbing was developed by a guy named Lehman, a researcher, and he said that workplace mobbing revolves around this. It's a malicious attempt to force people out of the workplace through unjustified accusations, humiliation, general harassment, emotional abuse, or terror. It is ganging up by leaders, organizations, superior co-workers, subordinates who all rally together into systematic and frequent mob-like behavior. The injury always results in physical, mental distress, or illness, social misery, and often expulsion from the workplace. That's the whole entire purpose of workplace mobbing. That's it. The UCMJ clearly states it is the organizational backbone, and the military needs it for unity, obedience, readiness into formal authority, clear rules, and enforceable sanctions. It makes it the single most important mechanism for maintaining good order and discipline in military organizations. AR 600 20 operationalizes the UCMJ at the unit level by translating statutory law into command responsibilities, procedures, and programs that sustain good order and discipline. That's everything that Pete Hegseth has been talking about. It does this through clear command authority. There's only one person in charge of an organization. Standardized conduct policies, corrective training, and accountability mechanisms that commanders must apply every single day. And trust me, if a commander's doing it, everybody else is doing it. Therefore, when a battalion commander signs an unsubstantiated AR 15-6 final disposition, senior officers not in command, DA civilians, military and civilian personnel, including attorneys, must respect the commander's lawful authority while using prescribed administrative, legal, and professional channels to protect due process, record integrity, and organizational legitimacy. Facts backed by knowledge, don't care about your feelings, and this ain't in Never Never Land. So I just want to close this. I want to be able to close this with, this has been an emotional journey. This has been therapeutic for me to be able to talk about this and to advocate for myself. And this is where I'm being kind. And I'm being assertive. This is not resilience that you find in books. It's not, this is stuff that's forged through institutional challenge and personal trials. And trust me, throughout this whole entire journey, I've completed a master's with a 4.0, and I completed a PhD with a 4.0 with a published dissertation and thesis on exactly what I'm talking about. Here, we can help you with your critical thinking skills and to help you raise your personal and professional standards so that you can become that leader and so that you can survive and thrive in workplace mobbing. And for all you leaders out there, there's a lot of things dealing with organizational behavior that go into this to prevent these kind of counterproductive behaviors. I'm talking about helping you to mitigate and manage these counterproductive behaviors so that you can live up to what you say that you're going to do, those organizational values, and being a responsible entity in your social community. Because if you're ready to unlock your potential and achieve lasting results, send me an email, shoot me a call, visit me at www.irbyethicalstrategies.com. And I'll leave you with a token. I always said that this was much bigger than me. If you look on the screen right there, if you see that blue highlighted date, May 2018, my last class that I taught was on May 4th, May 4th of 2018. Then I was out of the country. Think about what happened in April 20 at Fort Hood, almost 2 years later. This is what happens when you allow workplace mobbing and counterproductive behaviors to go on. Remember the story about the hyenas. Remember the story about the crop. This is what happens when you are not influencing leaders to go out into your organizations to apply these 4 prevention measures: knowing and following the rules, exhibiting modeling behaviors, promoting awareness of the organization policies, rules, procedures, Army regulations, UCMJ, and reducing the threat of counterproductive behaviors so that you can increase your lethality and mission effectiveness. And I'll leave you with that before I digress. Hey, I really appreciate you hanging on, watching this. Share this video. Give me a contact. Let me know. This is really important stuff because I'm telling you, all you have to do is go back and look at the changes to the UCMJ based upon the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee's findings and read those 2 paragraphs right there, because no one ever asked, who's that trainer? You're looking at him right here, right now. And God bless my partner's soul. He passed away about a year and a half ago. And so, and to be honest with you, Army don't have no more sharp trainers no more. They got rid of them. I appreciate your time. Thank you so very much, and goodbye.